started, it's 5 minutes since the webinar was supposed to begin. So I just wanted to welcome everybody and thank you for joining us today. Again, thank you for taking time out of your day to join for our webinar series. So today's topic is charging your worth, and we've got two panelists with us today, both Sarah Sudrovic from Bang Hair Studio in Ohio and Anthony Rossana from Aurelio Salon and Spa in New Jersey. We've had the fortunate opportunity to work with Vish and both Sarah and Anthony. And we just want to sort of discuss, the topic again, charging your worth. We've got quite a few talking points today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let Sarah first introduce herself and then Anthony right after. So Sarah, if you want to just have a chat and just introduce yourself and your salon to the group.
Okay. My name is Sarah Sudrovic. I own Bang Hair Studio in Youngstown, Ohio. Been open for a little over 10 years, and I've been a hairstylist for 15. I have 10 employees, and I run a commission salon. So we have no booth running, just commission or hourly, whichever is higher is how we run ours.
And Sarah, how long have you been using Vish in your salon?
I think about 6 months.
Maybe. Okay.
Maybe 5 months.
Thank you. And Anthony, how about you? Do you want to give yourself, give an introduction?
Sure. Yeah, my name's Anthony Rossana. I'm the owner of Aurelio Salon in Howell, New Jersey. We've been open for about 15 years. My wife is the hairstylist. I'm actually a chiropractor, so I do all the back of the house stuff, the ordering, the money, all that.
It's a pun intended there with back of the house.
Yeah. But the you don't want me cutting hair. I couldn't cut a straight line if my life depended on it. But yeah, we've been in business, as I said, for about 14 years. And we do have a commission salon as well. And let's see, currently we have about 20 employees currently.
Okay, great. And Sarah, sorry, I didn't know if you said that. How many hairdressers, how many chairs do you have in your salon?
We have 10 right now.
You have 10 chairs. Okay, great. And everyone, my name is Tim Howard. As I said, I'm the CIO, so I'm in charge of the innovation. But as many of you know, that on the call that I work closely, and I work in the CS department, the customer success. So I regularly meet with salon owners and hairdressers and just make sure that, for the onboarding process with Vish, but then any other support that's needed after. I would just like to give everybody on the call the opportunity. We are doing data reviews constantly and consistently. So if you haven't had a data review in a while and you would like a data review, and just for those of you who may not be familiar, we just go over your dashboard in Vish to ensure that you're getting the maximum value out of Vish and that you understand the data that's coming through. We're always adding new features. We're adding new reporting to Vish. So if anybody would like that, please email me directly. My email is at Timothy, TIMOTHY @getvish.com. And we can set up a data review with myself or anybody on the customer support team or customer success team. So I just want to go over the topics we're going to be covering today. So this webinar is typically about 30 to 45 minutes. At the end of the webinar today, the last 10 or 15 minutes of the webinar, we will open it up to a Q&A. So please bring your questions, anything you would like to know. We'd be happy to attempt to answer them for you or get you those answers. So the topics we're going to cover today are pricing strategies and deciding your direction. So we're going to talk about commission-based, maybe team-based pay, hourly, also charging services, a la carte or by the hour. We're also going to talk about best practices in communicating pricing. So how do you communicate pricing with your team, pricing changes, but then also how do you communicate that with your customers, with your salon guests? We're also going to talk about making sure that your team are on the same page in terms of how they're charging, how they're billing, and making sure they're charging what they're worth. One of the most important topics we have, and that that need often work or clarification salon is a communication with the consultation process. So how is your communication or your consultation working, and what are some ideas and tips that we can do to make that better? And handling hagglers and difficult clients is always a popular topic. So we're going to kind of touch on that a little bit. But first, I want to start by talking about to each of you, Sarah and Anthony, about your pricing strategies and why it fits your salon. So, how you determine to go with maybe, Sarah, the different pricing strategies you've had, maybe some of the insights into what has worked and what hasn't worked. And then I'll turn it over to you, Anthony, for the same question. And just let me know if you need me to repeat that at any time.
Sure.
So do you mean with the pricing strategy, how we apply the percentage, like we run ours 300%, and that's our overage? Is that what you're?
More so just sort of your pricing strategy in terms of your service menu.
Okay.
But then we can absolutely talk about, how you use the Vish product charges and the extra product and how we work on that markup. I can help you with that one as well.
So we have set prices. I have tiered pricing with stylists. We have 3 different tiers. So we have, well, actually 4 now. We have an assistant pricing, junior, senior, and master. And those are set at, they're about $5 difference for each haircuts, colors, and everything. And then that's where, Vish comes in, and we utilize that because that's our product overage. We have a certain amount of ounces that are allowed for each service. And then anything over that, we do 300% markup so that my stylists get charged for applying the color that's used. And, obviously the salon profits off of that as well. So we just have a set price on each one, and then anything over for extra bowls and stuff.
And a couple questions in that. How do you determine when it's time to raise your prices or to put somebody up a level in your pricing menu?
So I have
structure.
Key performance indicators that they have to hit, and I go through quarterly with them. So if they hit all of their indicators, then they get to move up to the next styling tier, and they can't move up again for another year, so that it's not a constant change in pricing for our guests when they come in. So they have to hit 75% booked. They have to have 50% request rate. They have to sell 15% retail to service, or 50% of guest buying retail. And then they also, what else is there? I think I said 50% rebooking. But once they hit all those, they move up a styling tier.
Okay, great.
And that goes along with their assistants too. That's when they are moving from an assistant level into the first tier.
And then how do you determine what your prices should be specifically for your color services? Do you look at the area around you? Do you look at competition? How is it that you determine what you're billing or what you're charging for, say, a new growth versus a highlight application?
We did, I guess I have a few friends obviously that own salons. I kind of compared with them. We're definitely not the cheapest, but I didn't want to be. I wanted to kind of keep it around pretty comparable, but a little higher than the other salons around because of the atmosphere and everything in the salon. So I don't mind charging a little bit more, and as long as the work that's going out is great. So, I did call around and ask, but I also had to figure out how long it was taking my stylist to do the service, and they have to be making at least minimum wage. So I had to make sure that they're getting it done fast enough where there's enough money coming in. So they have to have certain services done in a certain amount of time so that, the salon isn't losing by the hour,
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Mm-hmm. And how about you, Anthony? Same question. So
Okay.
How did you determine your pricing strategy?
Well, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay. You go ahead. Go ahead.
Originally, our pricing strategy was when we first opened, we followed at the time Robert Croman's Seriously CDs. I don't know if you ever heard of them. It's about opening up a salon. And what we did was we followed the formula he had in there. And the formula was pretty much, find out what your square footage is, find out what your rent is, find out what your fixed costs are going to be, find out what your color is going to be. Then you have to divide that all into the amount of hours and how many chairs you have, and giving you a base price of how much you need to make per hour to go ahead and go forward and be successful. So, when we did that, we had a pricing. I think our haircuts started at the time at $35 a haircut, all the way up to $75. Okay. And we have the tiered pricing as well. We have different levels, different stylists. And stylists will move up again, like Sarah said, she has key indicators. Same with us. They had to hit a certain benchmark across the board with rebooking, with education, with percentage of how much of new clients versus old clients, and then we would move them up to the next tier. And our tiers were about $15 apart, between let's say base price of a haircut. So that's how we originally figured out our price. And then every time we had a price increase, it was based off of, well, did my product go up? Did my rent go up? Did my other fixed expenses go up? And then we factored.
Oh, I just lost you. Are you still there? I think you're frozen, Anthony. Sarah? Oh, there we go.
Or in 2 more years. So we have to take that into account as well.
Okay. You froze actually there for a minute, Anthony. Would you mind just kind of recapping the last 30 seconds? Like
okay.
We lost you at so when you did that for the first while, you had that pricing structure for a little while, and then I think you said so if you could just continue from there.
Yeah. So the way we determined the price increase was depending on what my rent is. If my rent goes up, if my expenses go up, if the cost of goods go up, so when my distributor gives me a color price increase, well, I got to increase it on my end. Did you lose me again? Because
I think we did. Yeah, I think that's getting a little choppy. That's okay. I think we got the gist of what you're saying. And then how do you determine, like, based on the competition in your area, how much consideration goes into that, into where you fit into the value or the cost of the services? And let's try and talk about hair color specifically in that. So do you often do price comparison with salons in your area to make sure that you're at the tier that you want to be for the level of your salon?
Sarah?
Oh yes, I do. Yeah, and I mean, I think Ohio, I know, like our we have a lot of like great clips and other salons like that. So I try not, obviously they're a lot cheaper than us. Our haircuts start at 35 as well. I think that's what you were saying. So I don't go too much off of salons unless they're comparable to how ours is run and I guess how it looks. You know what I mean? Like a lot of my stylists are highly trained stylists, and I obviously take that into consideration with my pricing as well. So I don't really like to compare too much, other than I don't want to be way above what the other salons are. But I don't know. I guess sometimes I look into it, but not too often. But like I said, I just have to make sure that our hourly, that everybody's getting things done at a certain time, so that the hourly is not more than what we're bringing in.
Okay, that's great. Anthony, do you want to just talk on that for a second as well?
Yeah, we don't really compare to other salons in the area, because it doesn't matter if they're doing it for $10 and I'm doing it for $100. My $100 is based off of my expenses and what it needs to be to keep my doors open. So there's no way I'm going to be able to drop my color down to, whatever someone that's doing it really super cheap, just to compete. I'm not going to compete. That's not my market. I got my own little market, and my price is my price.
That's great. And then the next question for both of you is, how has Vish enabled you to use that pricing strategy? So, if we look at, and Sarah, you touched on it briefly. So if you want to maybe talk about the product charges, and I'm just going to frame that a little bit by telling everybody, because I'm sure not everybody on the call is familiar. But what we do at Vish is, when you're onboarded, we determine and we look at your service menu. And we know that, highlighting services are typically the most profitable in the salon. And then we move into the color services. So new growth, all over color, and then especially toners. We know that they're a lot less profitable for salons before they use Vish. So one of the things that we do is we consult with you when you onboard, and we look at your product allowances, or how much product you allow per service. Some salons know, but I use 40 grams of color when I'm doing a new growth application. But other salons, who don't have that information, then we can help you guide that. So what we would do then, set up your dashboard so that when somebody uses more color than it's allowed in the service, then we trigger a product charge. And what that enables, it enables your color services to be equally or to be predictably profitable across the board. So that if somebody uses 60 grams of color, well, rather than allowing the hairdresser or relying on the hairdresser to go and update front desk to say, hey, I use an extra 20 grams of color, we just do it automatically. So framing that, Sarah, do you want to just talk about how Vish has enabled you to use that in your pricing strategy, and how you work that into your menu and conversation?
Yeah, it's we allow 2 ounces of color for like a root touch up, and then highlights, some of them are 4 ounces. But what I did before Vish was it would be just $10 every 2-ounce bowl, and it would be up
Sorry,
to
somebody have there's some dogs in the background. Is that you, Sarah? Is that you,
no,
Anthony?
it's not mine.
That might be me.
Okay, Anthony, I'm
gonna mute my.
Perfect. There we go. Okay, Sarah, sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. So I left it up to my stylist to tell the front desk, I used 2 extra bowls of color, which would have been $20. But what I was finding out is people either weren't saying it, their bowl of color was like 10 ounces instead of 2 ounces. So the salon wasn't profiting or really even getting the money to replace the color, especially with toners, like as you were saying. So what I do now is there's the set allowance, and then anything over that, Vish obviously just automatically throws it up to the front desk, and there's never any questioning. There's always money there to obviously pay the stylist to replace the color, and the salon profits off of it as well.
Excellent.
Mhm.
Excellent. So Anthony, same with you. How is Vish? And I know, Anthony, you really worked on your benchmarks. You've been really diving down into the per cost application for the hairdressers, the amount of waste, the reweigh percentages. So if you just want to talk about how Vish has enabled you to align with your pricing strategy, and then, that communication with the customer. Oh, you're still muted, Anthony.
Okay. So with our pricing strategy, a lot of our input came from Goldwell, because we're Goldwell Titanium Salon. And Goldwell gave us originally the benchmarks of what it should be for cost per application. And that's what we were using originally. And then we brought in Vish because I think we met you guys at a forest demo. Yep. Or something like that for forest. So when we looked at it, we were more concerned about, color waste and saving money, not necessarily adjusting the prices. But then once we started using Vish and we saw what people were actually using versus what Goldwell suggested they use, allowed us to do 2 things. One, it allowed us to readjust our prices for color to cover what we're using. And 2, it allowed us to go back and retrain our stylists that were over applying or under applying. So, that's how it changed our pricing strategy a bit.
And so, Anthony, let me just ask you on that topic. Where you became aware of that people were using more than they should? How can you just kind of walk us through that? Like, where did you get that insight?
Well, normally Goldwell says, for a root touch up, let's say it's 40 grams of color and 40 grams of developer. So you have a total of 80, right? But when we looked on to people's insights off of Vish, I saw that one person was using, I think it was 137 on average per person of color.
Right.
So she was triggering product charges, and yes, the product charges, if she was charging them to the guest or rolling them over to the guest, would have covered my cost, but she's over mixing, so we had to go back and retrain her.
Right.
Did that answer your question?
Right. That's perfect. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Sorry, Sarah, repeat that.
I said I noticed that as well. I have 2 people actually that were over mixing initially, and that what I was telling them is essentially what they're doing. If it's just a root touch up, you only really need those 2 ounces. They're overcharging their client.
Right. Yeah, so that's the thing. And everybody, just to clarify, there's sort of two ways that we can kind of look at, product usage and product charges. The way that we work it in Vish is there's an actual markup that's put on the inventory, the hair color inventory, so that the salon would keep that amount. So if you pay $10 for a tube of color, we sell it to the customer at 20. So there's room there, there's profitability in that. But again, you want to make sure that your team are not overusing products, right? Because there's two places that we waste color. We waste color in the bowl, which we pour down the sink. Vish takes care of that. And we can, when you reweigh your bowls, we calculate what's left and adjust the formula. However, to what Anthony was speaking about, and both Sarah and Anthony, was that people just over apply color. They're heavy handed. And that there's an opportunity, and you get insight from your Vish dashboard to take that opportunity and have a conversation with your staff and maybe some re-education about how they're applying color, so that we can, again, reduce the cost to customers and not generate waste. Have you seen a pushback at all from customers with these product charges that we're talking about? Have you seen any conversations, or has there been any pushback from staff?
I have very, very, very few people, because I think the way that we're explaining it to them is, like, I would say to them, well, before we were just charging you $10 a bowl. Now it's just charging you exactly what that product cost. You know what I mean? So they don't need to know like the little details, but I do say, we weigh it out. You're only being charged for what we're using on you, and there's nothing else, so that's why when they do check out, sometimes there's like that weird, maybe it's $13.56. So they don't say anything because they know it's exact. I really haven't had any pushback. At first, when we got Vish, I had a little bit of pushback from the salon because it's just learning something new, and they thought that it was going to take a lot of time, but now we're like flying through it and everybody really, really loves it. And they're all making more money because they're actually charging people what they need to, instead of before they were afraid to charge people. They don't have a choice now. Everybody's happy. So it's all around. I think everybody's really, really happy with it.
That's great. Thank you. How about you, Anthony? Have any pushback from customers or from staff?
Yes, in the beginning we did. Customers, not so much, because what we used to do is very similar to what Sarah did. Was, if you mixed another bowl, you had to charge for another full bowl. So this way, instead of charging $10, if I only use $2, then they get charged $2. So it actually makes the guests' services more accurate, as Sarah said. My staff had a little bit of pushback because the minute you said you got to charge them appropriately, they're all of a sudden freaking out, because they want to spend the guests' money. And that's where we had to really educate our staff not to. Because what you need to do is you need to tell the guest, hey, look, this is what it's going to cost you to get this service done. And, if I might have to mix a little bit more, so it might be a couple dollars more, whatever, but this is the price, and that's why, like, some of our higher level stylists, when they first moved into that position, they had a hard time charging their new prices, because they were spending the people's money, not letting the people spend their money.
That's a great point. Yeah, that makes total sense. And then how are you helping your stylists realize their worth? So Sarah, you talked about that. You talked about them making more money and charging. I mean, just to frame that, when I was behind the chair, I would consistently forget or not charge for toners because I felt like it's part of my color work, and it's not really a choice that the customer has necessarily if they want a toner, because maybe it's the results I get. But if you could talk about that extra income that your team are receiving, and just how they feel about that.
I think that this has really made them more confident in their prices, and I don't notice them, I guess, being timid at the front desk. You know what I mean? They're not afraid to say what their price is anymore, because it is what it is. I make sure that they have a really great consultation in the beginning with them, so that people aren't shocked either when they're checking out. So all around with them, obviously their paychecks are better, and that's making them more confident too. So I haven't had any issues with them in the way that it changed and charged. So
excellent. And how about you, Anthony? I know you just said, that some people weren't charging completely for all the product charges that were there. And you and I met
Yeah.
recently to kind of go over some of those.
Right.
So if you can give us some insight into that, into how you have that communication with your hairdressers, making sure they're charging what they're worth.
Well, I mean, the communication is not only with them, but with our front desk, because it's up to the front desk to double check the ticket before they check out the guests. So they have to, you have to train the person to look into Vish. We try to get our stylists to just walk our guests up to the front, hand them off to the front desk, shake their, rebook their appointment, whatever, and then walk away, because as a stylist, it's an interesting industry, because any other industry, you go to buy something, you walk up to the register and you pay for it. You don't, I'm sorry, my dogs see someone outside,
That's
they're
okay.
barking like crazy.
That's okay.
And we just got a beagle. So
This
it's
is
the
the reality of
noisiest
working
thing
from
on,
home right now.
yeah.
So that's totally fine.
So we switched over to that type of model where you just bring the person up to the front and you leave them and you walk away, because the price is the price. When you go to a restaurant and a restaurant had, let's say, a price increase or whatever, you don't haggle with the restaurant and say, well, I want that T-bone steak for $10, not 11, or whatever it is.
Right.
I'm just using it as an example.
Right.
So, we try to train our stylists with that. And part of that is because we beat into their heads, they have to do the consultation and they have to go over pricing with the guest before they start any service.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
every single guest knows when they walk in the door what they're going to pay at the end, approximately. And
Right.
it's based on length of hair and how much color. And if it grabs it or not, and I need a toner or two toners or whatever.
The nice
Right.
thing with Vish too is, if you're in the middle of their color, and you can tell them exactly where they are price wise by checking with the front desk. And then,
Yep.
You can say, here's your options from, like, if they have a budget, we're at 180, you said 200, this is what we can do for the rest of, you know what I mean? So you can give them a play-by-play through their color.
Yeah, and just to clear for everybody on the call who's not familiar with Vish, there's a widget that we put on your front desk, but it's also in your dashboard as well. And what that is basically a digital ticket or a digital traveler that is consistently updating as we're mixing and using color, so that when a threshold is reached for the amount of product that is used in a service, we update the bill and the price for the front desk for that part. But there's also, if a service gets added, if somebody's getting a highlight service and a toner wasn't booked and a toner was done, or maybe a treatment was done, then we also capture those services and push that information to the front desk so that they know how to bill properly. Just to go back over the consultation, I just wanted to ask everybody, how do your stylists approach the pricing conversation in your consultations? And Anthony, you said an approximate. So can you talk about that, like how you communicate that range? If there is a range that the person's going to pay? Sure.
Well, first off, we have it on because of Forest. Forest allows us to have a consultation form actually on an iPad. So what my stylist will do after asking what the person's, and this is what happens during the initial consultation, as far as they're asking what their hair goals are, what they're looking for, what they want to achieve. They're asking what their budget is. Because we have different level stylists, the stylists, when they work up the price and figure out how much all this is going to cost, and then they have to go back and present the price. But prior to that, if they realize that, look, there's no way they're going to do it within what my level is, they might refer them to a different level and say to them, look, I understand you have a certain budget, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to achieve those results within my level as a stylist. So they would refer them to maybe someone that's a junior stylist, or just a regular stylist, as opposed to a master stylist, because we have those tiers. Right. And then once they do figure out the price, then they go back and they say to them, look, this is what your, as long as everything goes fine, this is what your price should be based off of how your hair takes the color. But in that conversation, they explain to them that, they can't guarantee anything, because they don't know how the hair is going to take the color, especially if they're new guests. If they're an older guest, they're, they still get the consultation as far as the price, but they don't go as much detail into it as if they were brand new.
Right. I guess unless they're getting a big change, like a change in the look,
Right.
like moving from a fall color into a spring or summer color.
Right. But then they have to understand too, and that's when we not only discuss that, but we also discuss time.
Okay.
Because when you got people that come in and they wanted to do that, they wanted to go from like dark brown all the way to that bluish gray,
Right.
and that's a
Silvery color.
process. It's not like you're going to do that in one sitting, but that's what they think.
Right.
So
And how do you have that conversation? So, and also how do you juggle the time? So this is for both of you. If you've got somebody come in and they're booked for, let's say, a half head highlight and a toner, and you've allocated 2.5 hours for the service, but they come in and they want that change. How do you balance that out? What are some of the conversations you have? And maybe Sarah, I'll direct that one to you.
We I have two assistants that help the whole salon. So a lot of the time, if it is something that takes a lot more time, I'll either have an assistant finish them, or I say, if that's not the case, then I'll say we could do maybe partial highlight instead of the full highlight today, or get them closer to where they want to be and then reschedule them for the remainder of the service. But a lot of times I try to either have one of the assistants help, or I will start it and have another one of my stylists maybe finish the end of the color if we need to. I'd like to get them, as close to where they want when they leave, so that they're not home waiting until their next appointment to get the rest of their service.
Okay, great. And is there many opportunities when you would just rebook the client for another day, or do you typically, again, use your assistants to get that service done?
If I can't use the assistants, I'll either ask them if they want to do, let them know what we could do in that time frame, or I'll just rebook them for another time.
And how do you factor in the extra cost of using an assistant? Like how do you build that in, or how do you just budget for that?
Well,
Are your assistants, and also, sorry, last part of that question, and are your assistants junior hairdressers that are training to go on the floor?
Yes, all of my assistants, most of my stylists will start as an assistant unless they have a clientele built. So they'll start as an assistant for at least 6 months, and we put them through training, and they have to like train out of each level before they can start taking those guests. I also, all my stylists double book. So as long as there's assistants are there to help them, they can double book, and then there's more money bringing in, and I pay them hourly.
Okay, great. All right, Anthony, how about you? When it comes to the consultation, when it comes to just difficult clients, or maybe that consultation is not going, or maybe the customer's bill is not as accurate as it should be. Sorry, is not as it's higher than it should be. How do you deal with that conversation with the customer, and who deals with it?
just want to unmute myself. So,
Okay.
With the services, we have to be very upfront and forward with them, because we have to let them know what is reality and what they can achieve. Give you an example. My niece now came in, wanted to go from brown to that bluish gray, look to it. So she's like, okay, this is what I want. So we looked at her and said, okay, well, this is going to take, like 4 visits or whatever. So we get done with it, and you got to come back, and you're going to have to do this, and then we're going to have to lighten it slowly, and we're going to have to come back, and whatever it was. So then at the end of the consultation, she looks at the stylist and says, but I'll look like that today, right? No,
Right.
you have to come
Right.
straight out and say, no, you're not. It's a process,
Right.
because can we get you there and strip your hair and have your hair fall out because we just over processed it? Yes, but we're not going to do that. So we got to do it over a little bit of time. So we plan that out. If a service is running really long, this COVID actually kind of worked out to a benefit, because Murphy, our governor, wouldn't allow businesses to be open after a certain time. So if anything was running over, we'd have to tell the guests, look, unfortunately, it's taking a little bit longer to do your hair the way we expected. We're going to have to reschedule this second part of your service, maybe the haircut, or, one time we even had to stop because the color wasn't coming out. We were having a difficult time. So the guests had to come back the next day, and then we continued with it. But I think if you're upfront and honest with the guests and communicate with them, they're okay overall. It's when
right.
the stylist wants to hide in the back and they're afraid to walk by and look at the person, and they don't want to meet the eyes. Don't look at them. They might be asking a question.
Right.
That's when the problems happen.
That's great. That's
We
great. Thank you.
Contracts for any process that's going to take multiple appointments. We have color contracts with our guests, and then in that contract, it'll say you have to come back, between 4 and 6 weeks. You have set appointments. This is your price range for each of your appointments. You have to have our take home. You have, so if they don't follow that contract, we can't guarantee we're going to be able to get them to where they want to be. And we have our stylists sign it as well as the guests, and they take a little piece of the bottom home with them so that they know when their appointment is, what they agreed to, and what each step is going to cost.
That's great. That's excellent. And I think that's a practice more salons should get into, is just having those expectations laid out and have the customer agree to them. So I've just got one final question for both of you. And then we're going to move into the Q&A. And I've got a few questions already, so I see them. There's questions about redos, and there's some specific questions about what Vish can do. I'll get to those in just a few minutes. So the closing question is, why is it so important to you that your stylists know and charge their worth? So if you can just kind of, take a minute or two just to answer that question, either one of you, whoever would like to go first. So again, why is it so important to you that your stylists know and charge their worth?
I think that, I don't know, I feel like hairstylists, especially newer ones, aren't confident, and they should be, they don't realize, well, obviously, how expensive it is to go to hair school and how hard it is to build. So right out of the gate, they just are, I guess, insecure in themselves. And I think that it's really important for them to know their worth so that they're getting a paycheck. A lot of people right out of hair school are barely making minimum wage, and there's no reason for it. So I always, like to get people, I guess, accustomed to charging what they don't not charge for the haircut, So I think that was another thing people were doing. Like, oh, I just trimmed it. Well, it's still a haircut. It's still your time. So now that they're getting used to that and they're just charging for everything that they're doing, it's making them more confident as a hairstylist. So I think it's very important.
That's great. Great answer. Thank you. How about you, Anthony?
Yeah, it goes back to not just, like before I talked about educating our guests, but this go back to educating our staff. And our staff needs to realize the value of their worth. Okay. They, there's no reason why people can't make a livable wage. And, it's taking money out of their pocket if they don't charge appropriately, as well as the salon's pocket. So, when we graduate them from the one tier to another, we celebrate them. We let people know that they've completed all this. They've done their education. They've done this. They've got and there are some guests that don't want to pay the higher price. And guess what? We have people at the other levels that they'll go to. But, it's really about educating the stylist as well, letting them know that it's okay to charge what you're worth.
Excellent.
Tesla doesn't ask Ford, how much is your vehicle? He just charge him. This is what I'm charging. That's it. That's my worth,
That's right.
So same thing.
That's great. And I think it's important to note that. I mean, I know just as a hairdresser myself, I was thrown, my first salon I ever worked in, I was thrown on the floor and I was charging exactly the same as every other hairdresser who worked there. And they could have been there for 5 years. They could have been there for 15 years. And I knew the quality of my work wasn't there. And I wish at the time, I don't know why, the salon didn't have a pricing structure, tier structure. It was just everybody was charging roughly the same amount. So for me personally, I knew I knew I shouldn't be charging that much. I knew I should have been charging more, which would have given me more confidence to have the clientele that I did. So, on the flip side of that, that was a bit of a negative experience by me having my price set too high. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go, and I thank you both for answering those questions so in depth and so well. We're going to go into a Q&A portion now. There's one question that's on this, and I'm going to direct this one to you, Sarah. should a stylist be content with $10 an hour if their tips are good? And are they doing a ton of work surpassing the $10 an hour? So I guess the question is sort of, what is it because you talked about minimum wage and how you don't feel that they have been, and how does a hairdresser feel if they're being charged an hourly rate, but they know that they're bringing in far more money? So could you just touch on that for a minute?
Yeah, so the way I pay my stylist is minimum wage, or I have some that are $10 an hour, or whatever is higher with a commission. You legally have to be paid for your time in a salon. Some salons don't pay stylists other than just commission, and that doesn't always equal out to be at least minimum wage. I don't think that $10 an hour, like I know a lot of my stylists would not be happy with just being paid $10 an hour plus their tips. Obviously, they all get their tips, but their commission, a lot of my stylists are making $25, $26, $27 an hour is what their paychecks break down to on their commissions. So I know that they would not be happy with that. I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if I paid some of my stylists $10 an hour, but I guess it just depends on what you're bringing in. If you're not bringing in $10 an hour, I guess, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's just, I guess, what your work is. Like, what are you bringing in weekly or daily, and then breaking that down to what your hourly should be.
Okay, that's great. So I have a question here, and I think, okay, so the question is about redos. And if there's a redo, who should pay for the color? Is it the stylist? Is it the salon? Is it the customer? What are your thoughts on that, both of you?
We cover, if there's a redo, the salon covers the product charge. I don't charge now. If it's a redo because the stylist had made a mistake, I do not charge the client the product charge. Now, if it's the client just decided, oh, I thought I would like this red, I don't really like it, can I come in and get something else done? Depending on the circumstances, I will charge them just the product charge on that. But my
Okay.
stylist never pay for their products.
Okay. So Vish makes it possible to see and to flag a redo in the system, so that we know if something's a redo, we can flag it in the system. So Sarah, before I move on to the next question, I just want to ask you about redos. What do you do when you see that a hairdresser has way more redos than the average hairdresser in your salon? Then it goes back to, okay, the salon just keeps paying for this person to do redos. How do you handle that?
We have, the way it's booked is we will book it as an adjustment service. And I do look back monthly and sometimes quarterly to see who has the adjustment services. And then I look into maybe what is it always a highlight? Is it always a toner? And I kind of look into what these adjustments are and where they really need to focus on with more training. And then I supply them with that training. I never, charge them for it, and I don't take from their paycheck or anything like that, but it's definitely an issue with training and just looking back on what they are.
That's great. Okay, so I've got two questions, and Anthony, I'll direct these towards you first. Both are sort of COVID related, or both are COVID related. So one, have you increased your prices during COVID? Do you plan to lower them once the restrictions have been lessened?
Okay, so when we were actually shut down, so when we reopened, there was an automatic price increase. So we just increased the price. People came in. The price is the price. Like I said before, you go into a restaurant, the restaurant doesn't inform you before you come in, doesn't ask you anything about, can we increase our price or are we going to? So we just increased it because we had a lot more expenses. We had 25% capacity. We had all new PPP stuff to buy, cleaning to buy. Our stylists were only allowed to work with one guest at a time. They couldn't double book. Right. So there was a lot of expenses that we brought on that now I had to pass along to the guests. Right. So they were added in, but they were added in on not every service across the board. They were added only into certain services. And things only went up, again, maybe $5 a service. So to cover the expenses. Will it go back after? No, it's because, my distributor is not going to lower their price. My
Right.
cost of gloves that I used to get for $2.95 a box through Webstaurant I can't get till to be $9, $10. They're not going to come back down to $3 a box. I guarantee it.
Right. Right.
So my prices aren't
That's
going to
fair.
change. Yeah.
And then the part two of that question, and either of you answer this one, is when using a time-based pricing menu, would you include the pricing time if you're not permitted to double book due to COVID restrictions?
If we're charging by the hour for like some things are like $100 an hour for like corrected color, we do not work on 2 people at a time. So because it's not, I don't feel that it's fair to the guest that I am going to be charging her $100 an hour and she's not getting my full attention and I'm not bouncing back and forth. So whatever, and most of the time with that, I can't double book. It's a constant process the whole time unless they're processing, but we do not double book. So it's just that flat $100 an hour and that's it.
Okay, great. All right, I think one of the last questions we have, is we're almost out of time here. It's a bit of a long question. So will Vish hold each stylist accountable for their own waste product use? Or is it very general where it's an average cost to each stylist? As it works for me in my salon, we are getting Vish training in June. We have set product costs for each service. However, lots of stylists either couple their services to avoid these costs or charge a la carte and overuse waste product that's not being accounted for. So Anthony, I know we've really focused on those metrics recently. So maybe if you want to take that about the accountability for each stylist based on their metrics that you're getting from your dashboard in Vish.
Well, what we did was, when it all depends on how you have your point of sale set up. Now, I know Tim has yelled at me because my wife has a ridiculous amount of services, but they're broken down into like a glossing, but it's a glossing if you have long hair, and it's a glossing whether or not you have short hair. And then it's, so she has a lot more different services for the same type of, service. So she has it broken down. But for us, it's great because we were looking at our numbers last night and we saw someone put in for a glossing, and they were using 127 grams of color. And then they had a glossing for short hair, but they were using 122, where most people were using 127 for color, for regular glossing, but only like 75 for short hair. So what the stylist was doing, they were charging incorrectly. So they wanted to give the person a break. They charged them a lesser price, but gave them the price of the higher glossing. So having that ability to see what they're charging and how much they're using per service helped us identify that. It also helped us identify if someone was over applying. Now, they can, the waste overall, there's a waste column overall that will average for the whole stylist as a whole. But then when you click in to that stylist, you can see individually per service how much their waste is. And that's what we were going through the other day, because we got our waste down to, as a whole, we're like that 5-6% waste going on right now at our salon. And that's the goal. And the way I got them there is I bonused them if they had a reweighing score of 100%, and if they had a waste score at a certain percent, they got a bonus. And I didn't mind paying them because Vish helped me save the money on the color that would have been wasted. So instead of paying my distributor, I gave it to my stylist and made my stylist happy.
That's a great point. Instead of giving it to your distributor, you give it to the stylist. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me just get 1 or 2 more questions here. So that one was done. So somebody asked earlier on about Robert Cromeans, the video series that you talked about, Anthony. So do you want to just give a little 10-second?
It was a CD audio. This is 15 years ago. When we first opened, we didn't know what to do. My wife was a hairstylist. She got annoyed at her job because she asked for a raise. They said no. And she decided to open up her own place. And we didn't know what to do. So we bought this series called Seriously. That's what it's called. There were a set of CDs, and he walks through about opening a salon. And we just kind of, okay, he said to do that. All right, let's do that. He said to do that. Let's do that. We didn't know any better.
That's great. So yeah, Robert Crow Museum, he was quite big in the Paul Mitchell network for many
Yes.
years. I think he might still be, I'm not sure. I haven't been out of this, out of the trade shows and that for quite a while. All right, so I think that's pretty much all we have time for today. There's no more questions coming in, but if there's any, Sarah or Anthony, if you want to kind of give any closing thoughts. One more question. Okay, so I'm wanting to charge hourly plus product instead of charging by the service. How much do you increase the cost for the product used? So Anthony, I think that when we set up your system, we took the cost of product and we doubled it. So just like you would a typical, like what you pay for a bottle of shampoo for what you retail it for. But then Sarah, do you want to just talk quickly about what we did with your strategy, how we did your markup?
My markup is 300%. So it equaled close to, it was actually a little bit more than what the 10 ounce for like our color. It was a little bit more than the $10 that we were charging before, but it's charging accurately now, and we have less waste. I'm actually making more money.
Great. And just to everybody, the flat fees, they're very often do they work. So if you're saying that a flat fee is $20 for a bowl of extra color, what is in that bowl varies from time to time, and then the honor system doesn't always make it. So again, what we do at Vish is we just price what's in the bowl, whatever's there, however much it is, whether it's 10 grams, 20 grams, 50 grams, 2 ounces, we will make sure that it's priced accurately. And the markup that we're talking about is, what you're going to charge over and above the cost. Anthony does 2 times, Sarah does 3 times. We recommend it in that range to not to go over. But we can discuss that. And again, if anybody wants to have this conversation, please go to our website and you can book a demo. If anybody wants to see a little bit more, if you're an existing Vish customer and you'd like to continue this conversation, perhaps maybe retweak how you're using Vish or get some more insight, you can just book a meeting directly with me. My email is timothy@getvish. Oh, sorry. So the question, just before we go, I just want to clarify my question. I'm just wanting to make sure that the stylists who are using more product, wasting more, are being charged or docked appropriately in comparison to the stylists that aren't. So again, you have a couple of different scenarios. I think Anthony wants to talk about this, is you don't always have to charge a stylist. The way Vish is set up is if they're going to use more product and they're overusing, well, their customers are going to pay more, which does 2 things, make sure the profitability is the same across all hairdressers, but makes them accountable because they got to ask their customers for that money. And I think you touched on that really well, Anthony, when you said about spending the client's money.
Well, with that, when we see an overuse, and we catch it because of Vish, that's when we have a conversation and we go through retraining with that stylist. And we don't charge, like, I don't dock our stylists. Like if they had to do a redo or anything like that, it doesn't come from them unless another stylist has to do the redo because they're not available. Then we were going to maybe take the sale away from them and give it to the other person. But we don't charge the stylist or anyone for any of that extra product. But if there's extra product used for a redo, but if there's extra product used, then we do have the guests pay for that. But then when we see that it's because the stylist is just heavy handed, like you said before, then we'd go through retraining with them.
Excellent. That's great. Well, Sarah and Anthony, I appreciate your time. I think we got a lot of valuable information out, and I think we had some great talking points today. I appreciate you joining us. We look forward to more of these webinars. Everybody go to getvish.com if you'd like to book a demo, if you'd like to find out more about Vish. And again, we continue these conversations with stylists, with hairdressers, industry experts, to really understand how the color business is changing and how Vish can help you make those changes. Thank you. Happy Monday, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We look forward to talking to you soon. Take care.
Thank you.